The church bells tolled like a warning. Isabella Romano stood before the altar, wrapped in white silk that felt more like chains than lace. Around her, the pews were filled with men in black suits, soldiers of the underworld. None of them smiled. None dared to breathe too loudly. At the end of the aisle stood Dante Moretti, the man everyone called Il, the king. His presence swallowed the air. He wasn't just powerful. He was power, tall, cold, and beautiful in a way that made her heart ache and her blood run cold. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction. Her father's empire had crumbled, debts unpaid, promises broken. The only way to stop more blood from being spilled was this marriage. A peace treaty sealed not with ink but vows. "Do you take this man to be your husband?" the priest asked. Isabella hesitated. Every instinct screamed run. But she could see her mother's tear-streaked face in the crowd. The men watching. The guns hidden beneath jackets. "I do," she whispered. When the words left her mouth, Dante's jaw tightened, like he'd expected her to refuse. He stepped closer, his hand cold and heavy as it closed around hers. The gold ring glinted between them like a shackle. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said softly. Dante didn't kiss her. He only leaned in, his lips stopping a breath away from her ear. His voice was a low growl, a promise that sent shivers through her bones. "You're mine until you give me an heir." The words sank deep, darker than any vow could be. The guests clapped politely, the sound hollow in the grand cathedral. Isabella forced a smile, her eyes fixed on the man who now owned her future. He looked down at her, unreadable. There was no warmth, no tenderness, only something fierce and unreadable behind those storm-gray eyes. As they left the altar, she felt the cold weight of his palm at the small of her back, guiding her forward. The world outside burst into sunlight, but Isabella had never felt so trapped. In the car, the silence was unbearable. Dante finally spoke, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You'll be safe here, Isabella. No one will touch you." She turned toward him, her voice trembling. "And what about you?" He met her eyes then, and for a split second she saw something that looked almost human. Then it was gone. "I already have," he said quietly. The car rolled toward his mansion, their new home, her gilded prison, and Isabella realized one terrible truth. This wasn't the end of her family's war. It was the beginning of hers. The Moretti estate was breathtaking in daylight, white marble walls, fountains whispering in the courtyard, roses blooming like secrets. But to Isabella, it all felt like a cage dipped in gold. Dante's men stood like shadows along the halls, nodding as she passed. They didn't speak. They didn't smile. They only followed orders. His orders. A maid named Lucia showed her to a room larger than her entire childhood home. The curtains were velvet, the bed massive, the view endless. "This is yours now, signora," Lucia said softly, setting down her suitcase. Isabella nodded, her throat tight. "Yours now." The words tasted bitter. When she was alone, she ran her fingers along the window glass, watching the iron gates close at the edge of the drive. She couldn't even see the road. The sound of freedom faded with every turn of the lock. That night, dinner was served in a dining room fit for royalty. The table could seat 20, but there were only 2 plates. Hers and his. Dante sat across from her, black suit immaculate, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The candlelight flickered over the sharp lines of his face. He ate in silence, the quiet between them filled with everything she wanted to say but didn't dare. Finally she found her voice. "You don't have to pretend," she said, setting her fork down. "We both know this isn't a marriage." He looked up slowly, his eyes unreadable. "Pretend? That you care. That I matter." His lips curved, not quite a smile, something darker. "You matter more than you think." Her heart jumped before she could stop it. "Because of the heir you want?" she snapped. The air tightened. His knife stilled against his plate. For a moment she thought she'd gone too far. Then Dante leaned back in his chair, gaze steady, voice low and dangerous. "I don't need a reminder of what I said, Isabella. You'll give me an heir, yes, but that's not the only reason you're here." "Then why?" she demanded. He stood. The candlelight caught in his eyes as he stepped toward her, slow and deliberate. When he reached her side, he leaned down, his breath brushing her cheek. "Because," he murmured, "you make peace look like war. And I've always been better at war." Her pulse roared in her ears. He straightened, leaving her trembling and furious, because she didn't understand him and worse, part of her wanted to. When he left the room, the echo of his footsteps lingered long after he was gone. For the first time since the wedding, Isabella realized this was more than a contract. It was a battle. And somewhere between his control and her defiance, someone was bound to lose. The days in the Moretti mansion passed like shadows, quiet, controlled, cold. Isabella woke every morning to silence, breakfast already served, Dante already gone. When he did return, it was late. His suit immaculate, his hands stained with the kind of power that didn't wash off easily. She told herself she didn't care. That he was just her captor, her husband by force. But every night when she heard his footsteps outside her door, her heart betrayed her. On the seventh day, curiosity won. Lucia, the maid, had been dusting the library when Isabella slipped inside. The room smelled of cedar and secrets, lined with shelves of old books, photos, and maps of territories marked in red. Then she saw it. A photograph half tucked behind a ledger, the edges worn. Her father, smiling, standing beside Dante Moretti. Her stomach dropped. Her father had always spoken of the Morettis as monsters. Men who'd ruined their family, destroyed their trade, stolen their fortune. But here they were, shoulder to shoulder, wine glasses raised like old friends. Looking for something? The deep voice froze her in place. Dante stood at the door, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes like winter steel. She tried to speak, but words caught in her throat. I was just spying? He stepped closer, his presence swallowing the room. Her fingers clenched around the photograph. You knew him. Something flickered across his face, pain, then anger, then nothing. I did, he said finally. Until he betrayed me. She frowned. Betrayed you? My father was a businessman. Dante laughed, low, bitter. Your father sold information to my enemies? He cost my brother his life. The room tilted. That's not true. Do you really think I married you for peace? He asked softly, stepping closer. I married you to end a debt. To make sure your name, your bloodline, would never rise against me again. Her throat tightened. So I'm just revenge to you. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, in a voice that almost broke, said, That's what I told myself. The silence that followed was heavy. His jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something that looked too much like guilt. Isabella turned away, clutching the photograph to her chest. You should have killed me instead, she whispered. He paused at the doorway. Don't tempt me, he murmured, but his voice cracked on the last word. When he left, she sank to the floor, heart racing, mind spinning. Because for the first time she saw the truth behind his cruelty. And it terrified her. He wasn't a monster. He was a man drowning in ghosts. Rain lashed against the windows that night, a storm roaring through the hills like a warning from the gods. Isabella stood by the glass, watching the lightning split the sky above the Moretti estate. Each strike echoed the chaos inside her chest. She knew now what her marriage truly was, not peace, not protection, but punishment. And yet, she couldn't make herself hate him completely. The library door creaked open behind her. Couldn't sleep? Dante's voice was low, rough from hours of meetings. She turned ice cold. Hard to sleep when you live in your enemy's house. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he poured himself a drink and crossed the room, his gaze flickering toward the storm. You shouldn't wander alone. It's not safe tonight. Safe? She scoffed. You keep me locked in this mansion like a prisoner. Dante looked at her then, really looked. I keep you alive, Isabella. There's a difference. She frowned, confused. Alive? From who? Before he could answer, the door burst open. Marco, one of Dante's guards, rushed in, breathless. Boss, the DeSantis family hit our shipment. They're moving toward the south docks. Dante's glass shattered in his hand. They wouldn't dare. But they had. The DeSantis family was the same group her father once did business with, and now they were sending a message. We remember. Stay here, Dante ordered, striding toward the door. You're going to fight? She asked. I'm going to end it, he growled. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. You'll be killed? He stopped, turning halfway toward her. Rain light glimmered off his face, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. She saw fear. Not for himself, but for her. If anything happens to me, he said quietly, Lucia will get you out. You go north to the vineyards. Don't look back. Her chest tightened. Why would you care what happens to me? He hesitated, just long enough for the storm to answer in thunder. Because, he said, you're the only thing left in my life that isn't built on blood. And then he was gone. Hours passed. The clock ticked like a countdown. When the gunfire finally echoed from beyond the gates, Isabella's heart stopped. She pressed her hands to the window, whispering prayers she didn't even believe in. When the cars returned, Dante wasn't among them. Only his coat, torn, blood-stained, was thrown across the steps. Lucia screamed. Isabella didn't. She just whispered to the empty night. You said you'd keep me safe, but who will keep you? The night stretched endlessly after the gunfire. Isabella sat in the foyer, wrapped in silence, staring at Dante's blood-stained coat. Each thunderclap outside made her flinch, but she refused to cry. When the front doors finally opened, a rush of cold air swept through the hall. 2 guards carried Dante inside. His white shirt was torn, crimson blooming across his side. Put him in the study, she ordered before anyone else could speak. The command surprised even her, but the men obeyed. Moments later, she knelt beside the sofa where he lay. His breathing was ragged, his face pale, but his eyes still burned with the same steel that terrified her. You should be resting, he rasped. You should be dead, she whispered back. He gave a weak, crooked smile. Disappointed? She glared at him but kept pressing the towel against his wound. You risked your life for a shipment. His hand caught hers, stopping her movements. Not for that. They threatened you, Isabella? Her breath caught. Me? They said they'd send me your wedding ring in a box if I didn't surrender. His voice roughened lower. I couldn't let that happen. The air between them shifted, thick, heavy, electric. Her pulse raced as his fingers lingered around hers, warm despite the chill of the room. Why would you care? She asked quietly. His eyes found hers, and for once there was no armor, no cruelty, only truth. Because you're the first thing I've wanted that isn't about power. Something inside her cracked. All the anger, the fear, the loneliness she'd swallowed for weeks spilled over in one tremor of breath. Don't say things you don't mean, she whispered. He let go of her hand, but his gaze didn't waver. I mean every word. You make me remember I'm still human. She wanted to hate him for saying it. Wanted to throw those words back at him. Instead, she reached out, brushing a lock of damp hair from his forehead. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm had quieted outside, but the one between them burned hotter. Get some rest, she murmured finally, standing. He caught her wrist again, gentler this time. Stay. Just until I fall asleep. Her heart twisted. Against every rule she'd made for herself, she nodded. As his eyes closed, she sat beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The firelight danced across his face, painting him in gold and shadow. He wasn't the monster she thought he was. But he wasn't safe either. Because somewhere between his lies and her defiance, a dangerous truth had taken root. She didn't want to be free of him anymore. The days after the attack blurred together. Dante refused doctors, refused rest, refused weakness. Isabella stayed near him, tending to his bandages in silence. He never said thank you, but he didn't have to. The way his eyes softened when she entered the room said enough. But peace, she had learned, never lasted in the Moretti mansion. One afternoon, while Dante met with his men in the study, Isabella wandered through the west wing, places he'd told her never to go. The corridors smelled of old smoke and secrets. A locked door caught her eye. She tried the handle. It didn't budge. But from inside she heard something, a faint hum like a generator. Or a voice. She hesitated, then noticed a key on the nearby table. He must have left it there by mistake. Inside the room the air was cold and heavy. Papers covered a desk. Maps, ledgers, photographs. At the center was a thick folder labeled Romano. Her last name. Her heart stuttered. She opened it. Inside were documents, bank records, shipments, coded messages, all signed by her father. And beneath them a single newspaper clipping. Businessman Carlo Romano killed in suspected mafia crossfire. Dante's name was scrawled at the bottom. Confirmed retaliation. Her hand trembled. Her father hadn't just betrayed Dante. Dante had killed him. Isabella. The folder slipped from her hands. Dante stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't be in here, he said quietly. She stepped back, fury and grief twisting her voice. You murdered my father. His jaw tightened. He ordered a hit on me first. That's your excuse? She cried. You took everything from me, and then you made me your wife. He crossed the room in 2 steps, but she didn't move. His voice broke raw and low. I did it to protect you. Your father made enemies who wanted the Romano name wiped out. I married you so they couldn't touch you without crossing me. She stared at him, disbelief burning into tears. You think that makes it better? No, he said. It makes it survivable. Silence hung between them. She could see the guilt in his eyes, years of it carved into every scar, every sleepless night. I should hate you, she whispered. Then hate me, he said. But stay alive. She shoved past him, heartbreaking. He didn't stop her. As the door slammed, Dante pressed his palm against the wall, breathing hard. He had built empires on lies, but this was the first one that truly cost him something. In the hallway, Isabella wiped her tears. He'd saved her life, yes, but he'd also destroyed it. And now she knew the truth. The only man who could protect her was the one she could never forgive. The night Isabella ran, the sky was heavy with rain. She didn't take anything but a coat and the photograph of her father, the one that started everything. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to whisper Dante's name, but she didn't look back. By the time she reached the outer gates, her shoes were soaked and her hands trembled as she fumbled with the lock. She half expected one of his guards to stop her. No one did. He'd always said nothing happened in his house without his knowledge, so maybe he wanted her to go. The road was long and winding, cutting through the forest toward the city lights below. Freedom shimmered in the distance. But freedom, she would soon learn, came with a price. A black car screeched to a stop ahead. Doors opened. Men stepped out, faces she didn't recognize but voices she'd heard whispered in Dante's office before. "Mrs. Moretti," one said, smiling coldly. "Your husband sends his regards." Before she could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth. When Isabella woke, her wrists were bound and the room smelled of gasoline and dust. A single bulb flickered overhead. Across from her stood Vittorio DeSantis, the man Dante had been fighting for months. He leaned against the table, lighting a cigarette. "You look surprised. Didn't your husband tell you?" "He's been killing my men for weeks because of you." She swallowed hard. "He doesn't care about me." Vittorio laughed. "Oh, he does. That's why you're still breathing." Her stomach twisted. If that was true, then Dante would come for her. And when he did, there'd be blood. Outside, a car engine roared. The men shifted uneasily. The air grew tense. Then, in a single thunderous crash, the door exploded inward. Dante stood in the smoke, a gun in one hand, rage in his eyes. "Touch her," he growled, "and you'll die before you hit the floor." Vittorio barely had time to aim before Dante fired. The echo shook the warehouse. Chaos erupted. Isabella fell to the floor as the ropes around her wrists loosened. Dante was there in seconds, pulling her to her feet, his arms wrapping around her like armor. "Are you hurt?" he asked, breathless. She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "You shouldn't have come." He cupped her face, eyes burning. "You're the only thing I'd still fight for." For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. Just rain, gunfire fading in the distance, and two hearts still beating. When they reached the car, she turned to him, voice breaking. "Why save me after everything?" He looked at her, drenched, bleeding, and unguarded. "Because I'd rather lose my life than lose you again." The drive back to the mansion was silent, but the silence wasn't peace, it was tension sharp enough to cut through steel. Dante's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Isabella sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the rain sliding down the window. The headlights painted streaks of gold across her face, and he could see the tremor in her jaw, the storm that was coming. When they reached the estate, she stepped out before the car even stopped. He followed, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Isabella. Don't." Her voice was ice. "Don't call my name like you didn't destroy everything I ever loved." He froze. "I just saved your life." She turned, her eyes flashing. "You saved what you claimed. Not me." He took a step closer, but she didn't move. "You don't understand how dangerous this world is. If I hadn't married you, you'd already be dead." "And what kind of life is this?" she demanded. "Trapped in your house, caged by your guilt?" Dante exhaled slowly, his temper barely restrained. "I gave you protection, a name, a future." She met his gaze head-on. "You gave me a prison with gold walls. I want my own future, one that isn't built on your crimes." The words hit him harder than a bullet. He'd faced assassins, betrayals, blood oaths, but nothing had ever terrified him like losing control of her. "You think you can just walk away from me?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Her chin lifted. "Watch me." He stepped forward, closing the space between them, his voice dropping to a growl. "You're my wife, Isabella. That means something in my world." She looked up at him, defiance blazing in her eyes. "Then maybe it's time I stop living in your world." For the first time, Dante didn't know what to say. She brushed past him, her perfume lingering like smoke in defiance. He didn't stop her this time, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. The woman walking away from him wasn't the frightened girl he'd married. She was fire now. And fire doesn't bow to kings. As she disappeared down the hall, Dante sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. He built an empire to control everything, and now the one thing he wanted most was slipping through his fingers. Somewhere deep down, a voice whispered what he refused to admit out loud. He might have claimed her body, but her heart would never be conquered. Weeks passed after that night. The mansion felt colder now, quieter, emptier. Dante buried himself in business, meetings, and blood. Anything to keep his mind off the one person he couldn't control. Isabella had moved into the far wing of the house. She didn't speak to him at meals, didn't wait for him at night. The woman who once trembled in his presence now carried herself like a queen. And yet, every time he saw her, something inside him cracked a little more. One morning Lucia found her in the garden, pale and shaking. "Signora, are you all right?" Isabella nodded weakly, clutching her stomach. "It's nothing. I just haven't eaten." But when the dizziness didn't stop, Lucia called the doctor. By evening the truth was undeniable. Isabella sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the test in her trembling hands. 2 lines. Her breath caught. A child. His child. The thought terrified her, and yet, beneath the fear, something warm bloomed in her chest. A spark of hope. A life that wasn't born from hate, but from something deeper. Something neither of them would admit. She didn't tell him immediately. Dante was dangerous when he felt cornered, and this news would change everything. But secrets never stayed hidden in his world for long. That night he found her in the library staring at the fire. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. "I've had my reasons." He stepped closer, searching her face. "You're pale. Are you sick?" Her lips parted, but no words came. His hand brushed her wrist, accidental, gentle. "Tell me what's wrong." Her throat tightened. "You want the truth?" "Always." She met his eyes. "I'm pregnant." The words fell like thunder between them. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then his gaze darkened, not with anger but something far more dangerous. He reached for her but she stepped back. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make this about control." "Control?" His voice roughened. "You're carrying my child." "I'm carrying a child," she corrected. "Not your property." Dante stared at her, the firelight flickering across his face. For once he didn't have a retort. Just silence, and something raw in his eyes that looked almost like fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I never thought I could have this. A family. You." She looked at him, then really looked, and for a heartbeat she saw not the Mafia King but the man beneath the armor. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. She turned away, her voice steady. "This child deserves a life free from blood and vengeance. I won't let you drag us both down." And with that, she left him standing there, silent, shaken, and realizing too late that the heir he demanded might be the one thing that could destroy him. Dante had fought wars before, against rivals, traitors, even his own conscience. But this time the battle wasn't in the streets. It was inside him. Since Isabella's confession, nothing felt the same. The empire he'd built with blood suddenly felt hollow. Every deal, every bullet, every victory, none of it mattered when the only person who could bring him peace wanted to walk away. He watched her from the doorway as she packed her things. Sunlight poured through the curtains, turning her hair into gold. She was leaving him, and for the first time in his life he didn't have a plan to stop it. "You're running again?" he said softly. She froze, then turned, eyes shining with quiet strength. "I'm protecting our child." "Our child." The words hit him like a prayer. He stepped closer. "You think you can raise my heir without me?" "I think," she whispered, "our child deserves a father, not a king who rules through fear." Silence stretched between them. Then for the first time in years, Dante let his armor fall. "I don't know how to be that man, Isabella." She smiled sadly. "Then start by letting me go." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I can give up everything," he said. "The business, the blood. Just, don't take the only good thing left in my life." Her heart twisted. She'd wanted revenge, freedom, but now she saw something she'd never expected in his eyes: sincerity. "Then prove it," she said quietly. "Walk away from the life that killed my father. From the power that's poisoning you." For a moment he said nothing. Then, without another word, he pulled out his phone and made the call that would change everything. "Luca," he said. "I'm done. Hand over the ports. The business is yours." "Boss, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I retire." He hung up before Luca could respond. Isabella stared, speechless. "You really just—" He smiled faintly. "For once I chose something worth losing everything for." Tears filled her eyes. "And what's that?" He brushed a strand of hair from her face, voice low and raw. You. She fell into his arms then, the weight of pain, love and forgiveness melting between them. For the first time, Dante Moretti wasn't the Mafia King. He was just a man, a husband, a father, a lover reborn. Outside the rain stopped. The sky cleared. And for the first time the house didn't feel like a prison. It felt like home. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more steamy, emotional mafia love stories every week.